Hey there folks, so welcome to Spectrum Pulse. We talk about music, movies, art, and culture. And today I'm finally going to be talking about the newest album, the sophomore album from Wolf Alice, called Visions of a Life. I'm not even sure where to start with this one, and if you saw my last Wolf Alice review back in 2015, you will understand why. See, 2 years ago, I did cover the critically acclaimed debut album My Love Is Cool, and unlike the majority of critics, I wasn't really a fan, half because I wasn't really convinced that the band could effectively differentiate themselves from their 90s influences like Hole, or half because when they tried to introduce more modern elements of pop into their sound, I found them pretty underwhelming or poorly executed, not helped by a lot of overproduction and a lack of a defined edge, especially in a lot of the guitars. Yeah, the actual compositions and the lyrics were easily the best part of this record. There was a solid core, but good writing delivered without the raw presence or firepower in order to complement the instrumentation, that can be a considerable letdown. It just did not click for me whatsoever. But again, the band won a lot of critical acclaim, especially in the UK, and if anything, they were looking to get even more wild and experimental on their follow-up this year, Visions of a Life, swapping out producer Mike Crossey for Justin Mendel Johnson, a producer and musician with whom I've got the sort of history that doesn't exactly present a clean picture. Suffice to say, he can have a bad habit of piling in distracting instrumental elements that can clutter the mix, like he did for M83 and, let's be honest, Paramore. And considering that Wolf Alice apparently put together a noisier, more eclectic record this time around, I had no idea how or even if their style would click together. But hey, the band won just as much, if not more, critical acclaim this time around for this record, so I might as well talk about it. 2 months late. So what'd I find on Visions of a Life? So you know, I'll be honest, this was a very weird listening experience for me. The sort of case where after my first few listens, I immediately went back to My Love Is Cool to see if I had missed something since the last time. And while that record was a shade bit better than I'd remembered, it seemed like more of my criticisms, they still connected, and yet Visions of a Life was a bizarre experience all the same, and that it seemed like the strengths for which I had praised the band before were diminished in favor of correcting a lot of the weaknesses, almost to the point of feeling like a completely different band. Now, not all of said weaknesses were fixed this time around. One reason that, while I think this album is a little bit better than My Love Is Cool, I would not really call it great, really only decent at best for me. But you know what? If this is the direction that Wolf Alice is heading in the future, I do think it shows some promise, and you know what? I can respect them for that. And a huge part of this, it comes in the sound. And man, it's been a while since I've heard a change in producer improve a record so considerably. Again, I have never been a huge fan of Justin Mendel Johnson's work, but his choices to focus on tightening the smoky edge in some of the guitars, giving them the space and bite they need, giving the bass line some real presence and groove, slightly thicker multi-tracking around Ellie Rosell's vocals, and more drums over drum machines, those are all the right choices. Naturally thickening the sound and expanding the mix into shoegaze elements that always felt so muddy and clumsy on My Love Is Cool. Now, of course, everything is still comfortably blanketed in reverb to really cut or expose a true edge, and if you're expecting a prominent melodic progression to erupt outside of the looped guitar phrases, you're gonna wind up a little bit frustrated, as I did. Indeed, I would say that contributes to many of these songs not quite feeling as immediately catchy as they were on the debut, but you know what? Overall, the tones, they are more agreeable, and yet they also expose a few less welcome shortcomings. And the first is a carryover from their debut. Without more distinctive melodic hooks this time around, it can feel a little bit distracting when you can trace the sonic inspiration of so many of these songs so quickly, especially when they try to inject a little bit more of a punk vibe on songs like Space and Time or Yuck Fu, the latter of which it might as well be a perfect pussy B-side from Say Yes to Love 3 years ago, or how Beautifully Unconventional reads is a much more polished X-Hex or Sleater Kinney track, or how songs like After the 0 Hour, they owe a particularly obvious debt to the more atmospheric ambient folk you could see from like Fiona Apple or Nico Case. Now let me stress, this isn't inherently a bad thing. Every act that I just mentioned I like or even love, but it's also revealing of the second major shortcoming, and that comes in many of the compositions themselves. As I said before, most of these songs don't quite have the same driving melodic hooks that stuck so prominently from their last album. I get why some people like that record more on that basis, and I have to tack at least some of that down to the compositions that can feel bizarrely misshapen, typically cropped short on songs like Beautifully Unconventional that stop abruptly, or like Planet Hunter, but in some cases missing a bridge or a true crescendo moment to really put them over the top, and they don't have it's a little bizarre. And the latter song, that Planet Hunter, it's probably close to my favorite on this album. It does come together, but it could have been better. Now, again, I'm not saying that there weren't tracks that connect for me. Heavenward is a solid slice of noisy shoegaze that I like. The firmer flutters around the gentle cushion of vocals on Don't Delete These Kisses. It builds impressively well with one of the better hooks and crescendos on the album. The thicker, late 60s inspired groove on Formidable Cool, it's got some impressive simmer to it. Sad Boy takes the liquid layers of warm guitar to spike off the accents of distortion pretty well, and the closing title track manages its noisy transitions pretty effectively over its 8-minute runtime. It doesn't feel like it's wasting that time, it's got some heft to it. I can admire that. But now we have to get to the lyrics. And here's where the comparison to Wolf Alice's inspirations really hurts them, because I was surprisingly underwhelmed by this. Like on My Love Is Cool, Ellie Rosell does seem to have keen insight into her younger protagonist in their uneasy transition towards the open-ended questions of adulthood that don't have easy answers, with a full splatter painting of emotions on display that, you know what, from a teenage viewpoint, do at least feel somewhat consistent. The antisocial rage of Yuck Fu, the unsettled panic and anxiety of Sky Musings and Space and Time, the decay and death of elder figures on Heavenward and Saint Purple and Green, all with the sense that Rosell was bottling these emotions away and only now is allowing herself the confidence to let them go free. Hell, that was literally the lyrical arc of Don't Delete the Kisses, and I like how she's more willing to show that naked emotionality there and on the title track, showing that progression. Even if it demands some pain for her, there's a deeper satisfaction in order to be won than just be disaffected and cynical. And yet at the same time, it's hard not to feel like bottled into these songs, it might have the emotionality of adolescence, but it might miss some of the nuance, drawing allusions to other art like on Beautifully Unconventional, or even the cult-like appeal of Charles Manson on Formidable Cool, but not really willing to plumb much deeper into the emotions beyond maybe 2 dimensions. Broad strokes that captures the picture in vivid detail, but miss some of the depth by relying on stories or metaphors that stick pretty close to cliche. Now, an easy comparison point for me is Always, another group that is shameless in borrowing from the past and really has some similar antisocial coming out into the light tendencies, but it does so in the service of absolutely terrific hooks and writing that reflects both a deeper narrative and some real insight into that female character. But you know what, I gotta be honest here. The element that has always pushed me away from Wolf Alice is Ellie Rosell herself, and to some extent, I'm a little baffled why that is. She's certainly passable, emulating the styles that would fit with this music, and Justin Mendel Johnson is smart enough to give her more multi-tracking that complements a lot of her thinner tones. Hell, she even sticks with more of her lower to mid-range this time around, and that's only a good thing. She's got some body there. And yet, with every song, I find myself just not gripped whatsoever by her delivery. Maybe it's the production that places her a little bit too far back in the mix to really command it. Maybe it's an odd mismatch in content and delivery, or she'd perhaps be a little bit more convincing selling this material with more open, adolescent sincerity in comparison with the reserve that she brings to a lot of songs here. Or maybe it's when placed in contrast with other acts in this vein where the comparison is so stark, there is a deeper well of charisma or presence or raw intensity that fits the style that Rosell just doesn't have yet, especially when she tries to utilize a hushed sing-talk delivery that seems to cry out for more emotion or rawness or production that could complement the subtlety if she's trying to deliver it there. But as it is, look, I do think Visions of a Life is a transitional step actually in the right direction. I know there are some who consider My Life Is Cool the stronger album. When it comes to composition on a structural level, it probably was. And the sharp songwriting did save most of it from production choices that just did not work for me. But again, you know what? Some of that is my issue. Visions of a Life, on the other hand, it makes the right production choices for me, but it marries them to more scattered writing as a whole and a lot of compositions that feel a little abortive, which leads to a better tone, but rougher fundamentals. But really, that is just enough to push this to a light 6 out of 10. Again, a good tone in this direction. And when you factor in the vocals that are just not clicking for me, I think I'm just inclined to say Wolf Alice isn't for me. I get the appeal. And if you're more of a fan, I recommend you check this out. Again, I'm not really blown away or all that impressed, but for Wolf Alice, I do see some potential if they continue down this path. Mature a little bit, refine some of the details and the hooks, and hell, in my books, that's worth following. So yeah, check it out. So yeah, thanks a lot for watching. I'd like to like and subscribe. I'd be more than grateful. Yes, I know I'm late with this. I know you're not going to like this. I remember what happened with the last Wolf Alice review, but hey, you want to buy the record, links in the description below. Polls right there for you to tell me how wrong I am. Beyond that, anything else I might be able to do to improve my presentation, I'm all ears. And if you guys want to get involved in my scheduling process and support this channel, so I'm not covering this 2 months late, link to my Patreon is right over there, where 3 times a week you guys get to vote on my schedule, and once a week for the higher tier contributors, you guys get to add albums, movies, or even a top 10 list to that schedule. More details right over there. Happy to get you guys involved before the end of the year. But till then, I'm Mark, you're watching Spectrum Pulse, and I'll see you next time.